On the phone is Manyara Irene Muyenziwa, the president of the Freedom of Rights under Sovereign. What's your... Can you start by telling us about your party and what you've got for the electorate?
The name of our party, as it says, Freedom of Rights under Sovereign. That is just entailing the changes that are actually required in Zimbabwe. On the basis of just freedom within the sovereign. I think freedom, especially economic emancipation, is where the freedom lies at this very point in time. I think the usual days or the bygone era of having that's what reveal and actually show that the times have changed and we have moved on. So what us as a government is actually a movement that seeks to inject, like competency and honest governance into the political and civil sectors of Zimbabwe to put the country on a path. We are trying to bring in a fresh breath of hope for engagement, economic empowerment and emancipation, things like dignity, sense of ownership, pride to the people of Zimbabwe themselves. Our party idealistically is more about economic transformation and emancipation, like I'm saying, national pride, our dignity, Ubuntu, things like that is what for us is about, especially within the sovereignty of our country. We're not looking at anywhere else. We're trying to start with the nucleus of the country itself and then spreading that all across. So our party exists to build and safeguard a fair and free and open society in which we seek to balance the fundamental values of freedom, equality, and community. And as I say this, this pushes us, into the electoral reform that you're talking about, because we need to see that, no one shall be enslaved by ignorance or conformity of the right proper channels or processes of such issues. If you look at the electoral reform for Zimbabwe itself, you can find that not much ground has been covered in terms of implementing electoral reforms to enable, sort of like a very credible way of running a free and fair election. So what we see as for us is for us to bring in new ideas by identifying any gaps within the legal framework of the electoral reforms themselves. And the other issue on electoral reform that we're trying to look into is you find that issues of the biometric fingerprint voting is what for us is really, really pushing hard for, especially in the rural areas, because you find that as I moved around myself going in the rural areas, I did find a lot of people, pretty much I said 60% of them, were saying that they haven't got IDs, but they managed to vote. And then you wonder yourself, how did they manage to register? What is actually going on, in these parts of Zimbabwe? So these are some of the things that we're trying to bring up, because the biometric fingerprint voting is not a new reform. It's a reform that's there already. But as I held a meeting with ZEC some time back in regards to electoral reforms, but looking at, how women are involved in elections, we did find that though the biometric fingerprint voting is there, when it was used, it was recorded as done, but actually it was just the registration that was done. But the actual using your finger to actually put it on the imprint itself was never done. But all of those numbers were added or counted as that, auto did vote. So these are some of the issues that, we need to look into and see how best we can put in processes of transparency in place and accountability in such areas as well, where things are not credible and they are not transparent.
Okay, going back to Forus on the phone. Thank you very much for staying with us. Manyara Irene Muyenziwa, same question. People accuse you of wanting to get into Poland.
Yes. I think you'll find that Poland doesn't allow the flexibility of autonomy that's actually required for any political party to express themselves. With that regard, that's just telling you that Forus will never join Poland. What you find is, I think it's a lot of issues that haven't got consensus amongst all parties in regards to how what is the best approach on putting our heads together to come up with a solution. Because what you're finding is a lot of people are saying that, the current ruling party uses its executive powers, on all these small political parties, that joined Poland. And we know that there is this issue of decoy political parties that, they actually work on behalf of the current ruling party. So these are some of the issues that for us is coming in with new reforms. Something like, if we have party talks, would be the name that I would call whatever congregation that the number of parties have. It can be 5 party talks. It can be 6 party talks. And the other thing is allowing flexibility for people to point out a new direction of actually holding these meetings in terms of, I think, adding on a third party who is, non-sided, who is non-aligned to any party, either it be ZANU-PF, Forus, MDC, or any other new party that is out there. So those are the issues that you find that Poland has, because it's not allowing that autonomy. It's not allowing people to call in third parties like the United Nations, call in parties like the African Union, call in parties like SADC members themselves, so that they can come in and be referees to whatever discussions that are on the table. So hence you're finding that we need a new thing. Like I'm saying, I think party talks would be something that I would come up with, something that is practical, something that is non-sided. Each one can come in and we just say we held, I don't know if it's 152 parties that are out there. It would be 152 party talks. And each one is allowed flexibility to say what direction they want to take in regards to the gathering itself.
Was to say, will you be taking part in the by-election of 26 March?
I don't think we will be participating in the by-elections for so many reasons. I think, like I said, I think the impediments that you find in the electoral process itself is what you find that it's not fit for purpose. And our party is much more of a solution-orientated, party. I'm sure you're finding as I speak, I'm trying to put in proposals or on each and every problem that we have to say, can we look at it this way? So it's not just promises, that we just put in place. It's implementation, and it's ideas that we have to say, you can do it. We're just not talking about issues. We are offering solutions. So you find that, the by-elections, even the 2023 elections, I think should have been postponed for so many reasons. I think you're finding that the necessary time that's required, for campaigning has not been put in place. Alternative mechanisms of campaigning have not been put in place. Alternative, remote voting methods have not been put in place. What I'm just simply saying is that there aren't any protocols, that are there to say, is this election, fit for purpose? Is it practical? Is it doable? So many things. That takes you back to the issue that you have of, ZEC itself, not having any control in terms of the legal framework of the elections, themselves. And what I proposed was to bring in something that we call a review ethics council. With an ethics council, it sits in between parties and, even ZEC itself, so that we can do checks and balances in terms of, the electoral process, in terms of transparency, and so many things. So what you're finding is because of so many issues that you have in Zimbabwe, you do have limitations that are imposed on people directly or indirectly. I think the MOPA is one main problem that you have, of which it suits others and not fit for others as well. What you're finding is an example I can give is this is a month and a half ago when I was doing my rural rounds. I did find I was in the area called Gokwe. And I like to give examples so that we're practical with what we're talking about. Hence, I was talking about the biometric fingerprint voting. I don't think that has been put in place as well, properly. What you did find is, I think President Mnangagwa did hold a rally in Gokwe, and nearly 5,000 people turned up. 5,000 at a time whereby you've got these restrictions, these curfews that are put in place, whereby you're saying, when I was going around, I was only allowed a gathering of just up to 100. Yeah, this is the time that President Mnangagwa held a rally in Gokwe. 5,000, nearly 5,000 people attended. So that's what you're finding. But then with MOPA, you'd find opposition parties, will fall below under that bar, being told you cannot hold anything, with the incorrect numbers. And these are issues that you find that, parties have not been allowed to do the campaigning processes properly. And you're finding as though that this affects citizens themselves. You need to have special voting arrangements, that allow citizens to cast their votes, remotely. Has that been looked into? Not in any person at a polling station. Has that been looked into? What about the posting system? Has that been looked into? What about the online system, through a computer? Has that been looked into? What about mobile phone applications? Has that been looked into?
Okay, so I have a question then, because I think you've made that point quite a bit. The question being, you said you're not voting and you don't like the conditions that are there, but do you have the capacity in 2023 to field candidates in all local government and parliamentary seats?
Certainly. And I can, safely say that we've got about 167 MPs as I speak right now. So I think coming to 2023, I'm sure I will have the total 210. And what Forus is going to do as well, not like any other parties, because as I went around speaking, I think you're finding other parties as well saying that this particular region saves ZANU-PF. You can never put an MP there. It's a waste of time. And I would like to look at things differently, whereby we're going to make sure that we have the 210 MPs to each and every constituency, so that we are not hemorrhaging ourselves in terms of the numbers that we require, from our voters. So you're finding that, Forus is well equipped for 2023. The by-elections are not fit for purpose. You're finding that it's actually just a litmus test that's required by the current ruling party itself to see where their strength is. So we're not going to partake into the by-elections just because of that reason.
And then before I let you go, the final question, what's your final pitch to the people of Zimbabwe?
What is my final pitch?
Yes, so going forward, so that, like creating how you want them to keep an eye out for you, so that you can create your urban and rural footprint and so forth.
Yes, yeah. I think it's just, like I said, when I speak, it's solution-orientated. We're just not talking verbatim. I'm looking at so many issues, concerning, I think, the economy itself. I think I did hear, one of the leaders say, I think our currency is devalued. But then one thing you can do as well is you need to push out the use of foreign currency, which is the Zimbabwean the US dollar that we're using at the moment. We don't need that. For you to find strength in your economy, you have to value your dollar. You have to push the value of your dollar up. So we need to find ourselves in a way whereby we are actually using the Zimbabwean dollar and less of the American US dollar. So these are some of the things that we are looking into, the type of fiscal and monetary policies that we need to put in place. How are we going to put it through? And looking at the distribution of implementation of the ways that we measure money. What is the right application that's needed for our economy? Do we need to use the M1, M0, or M3 applications as a measure of money, which is what Zimbabwe is not doing at the moment? The current ruling party is not doing that. We need proper applications of economic tools that will actually uphold our country. We need to apply the liberation tool, we need to apply the globalization tool, and we need to apply the privatization tool. With the liberation tool, I keep going back to that, saying, you need to apply liberation in terms of lack of flexibility in the frameworks that are there. They are so rigid, so you're finding that you're having quite a lot of bureaucratic red tapes, from companies to companies, from individuals to individuals. These are some of the things that we need to root out and see if we can implement new ideas. And as well, we are looking at globalization, is looking at the international arena. How best, can we use our leverage in terms of agriculture, our leverage in terms of mining, our leverage in terms of tourism. So you've got so many tools that you can look there, whereby for us is saying, if we propel such tools and the right proper men with the right application of tools, you'll find that we can propel the country forward. What we need to do is create employment and actually rebuild our infrastructure. We're not going to promise any new infrastructure to say we're going to do what they call the spaghetti roads like other mature democracies have. No, we need to start with our potholes. Just the basic thing, our local roads. That's what for us is starting with. How can we remove the potholes? How can we repair the potholes just within the locals before I start giving you the future, the horizon, something that is not applicable, because as we know that, our country is suffering in terms of the date sovereignty. We've got a structural date to the IMF.
Okay, can I just ask you to round up, because I'd like to give the opportunity for others before we round up.
Sorry, I can go on forever. But what I'm just simply saying is just looking at how we can achieve an average annual real GDP growth rate, which needs to be above 9%, and as well as maintain fiscal deficits, averaging them not more than 3% of GDP, in line with what SADC targets is implementing. So these are some of the things that we...
Okay, thank you very much. I really have to ask the other ones to come on, because...
Sorry.
Thank you very much. The President of the Freedom of Rights under Sovereign, Manyara Irene Muyenziwa. Thank you very much for joining us, and all the best.